Remember those classic Betty Crocker family meals you hardly see anymore? The ones tucked in faded cookbooks, turning simple ingredients into comforting dinners that filled the table with warmth and laughter. These recipes were quick, practical, and full of heart, perfect for busy weeknights or Sunday suppers. Let's take a nostalgic trip back to 30 old favorites that have quietly vanished from kitchens everywhere. Tuna noodle casserole. There's something inherently comforting about a dish that can appear on the table in under 30 minutes, yet feels like it took hours of care and attention. Tuna noodle casserole, that humble staple of mid-century American kitchens, was born in the 1940s and 50s when frugality wasn't just a virtue, it was a necessity. Families navigating wartime rationing or post-war shortages relied on pantry staples, and tuna, noodles, and a can of cream of mushroom soup became a trifecta of convenience and sustenance. It was simple, yes, but in its simplicity lay a certain magic. The ingredients read like a map of resourcefulness: cooked egg noodles, canned tuna, cream of mushroom soup, a sprinkle of onion, perhaps a handful of frozen peas, all crowned with buttery breadcrumbs or crushed potato chips for a little golden crunch. It was inexpensive, shelf-stay, and almost foolproof, a dish that could stretch $1 while feeding an entire family. Preparation was delightfully straightforward. Boil the noodles, mix with tuna and soup, fold in vegetables, transfer to a casserole dish, top with crumbs, and bake until golden. No special techniques, no fuss. Just a warm, hearty meal that required little more than attention and a preheated oven. For many, it was a gateway into cooking, a dish that offered immediate gratification without intimidating the cook. Yet, beyond its practicality, tuna noodle casserole carries memory. It evokes the aroma of a family gathering around the table, laughter mingling with the scent of bubbling cheese and tender noodles. In many households, it was the first casserole a child learned to make, a rite of passage in domestic education. Its charm was also social. Potlucks, church suppers, and neighborhood gatherings often featured a tray of golden-baked tuna noodles, a subtle testimony to ingenuity and communal care. Today, it might seem dated next to Instagram-worthy bowls of poke or TikTok pasta hacks, yet its charm endures. In a world of fast food and meal kits, tuna noodle casserole reminds us that comfort, creativity, and resilience often reside in the simplest of ingredients, and that sometimes nostalgia tastes just like creamy noodles baked to golden perfection, with a hint of buttery crunch and the unmistakable scent of home. Chicken divan. Chicken divan is one of those dishes that makes you marvel at mid-century American ingenuity, taking simple ingredients and turning them into something that feels almost luxurious. Emerging in the 1950s, it was named after the elegant Divan Parisian restaurant in New York, yet adapted for suburban kitchens across the country. Housewives and young cooks didn't need to travel to the city to enjoy a dish that balanced creaminess, tenderness, and a hint of sophistication. A casserole dish and a can of soup were all that stood between them and culinary success. The ingredients were deceptively straightforward. Poached or roasted chicken, usually leftovers, met a velvety sauce made from cream of broccoli or cream of chicken soup, often enriched with mayonnaise or a dash of lemon for brightness. Fresh or frozen broccoli added color and nutrition, and a sprinkling of cheese or buttery crumbs on top gave the finishing touch. Everything came together in a shallow casserole dish, baked just long enough for the flavors to meld and the topping to turn golden and inviting. The preparation was practical yet thoughtful. The chicken was layered with broccoli, smothered in sauce, crowned with a golden crust, and slid into the oven. The result was a dish that felt elegant without demanding hours of attention, a testament to the resourcefulness of post-war home cooks. Chicken divan also carries nostalgia in its folds. It evokes memories of Sunday dinners, of carefully set tables, and families savoring something a little special. It was often a dish that announced subtly that effort and care had gone into feeding the people you loved, even when time and resources were limited. Today, it might feel a bit retro, almost kitschy compared to gourmet takeout or Instagram-ready meals. Yet it endures as a reminder that comfort and elegance are not mutually exclusive. Chicken divan proves that with a few simple ingredients and a little creativity, a casserole can be both practical and indulgent, a delicious bridge between frugality and finesse. Meatloaf with surprise center. Meatloaf has always been the quintessential American comfort food, but the version with a surprise center takes nostalgia and ingenuity to a whole new level. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, this dish emerged from an era when resourcefulness was not just admired, it was expected. Home cooks were tasked with feeding families on a budget, stretching ground beef and pantry staples into meals that were hearty, filling, and sometimes a little playful. The surprise at the heart of the loaf, often hard-boiled eggs, chopped vegetables, or even a ribbon of cheese, turned a humble meatloaf into something theatrical, almost magical, drawing awe from children and adults alike. The ingredients were simple yet versatile: ground beef, breadcrumbs or crackers, an egg or two to bind, milk, onions, and seasonings, with the surprise filling carefully nestled in the center before baking. Some families layered hard-boiled eggs end to end, creating a striking visual when the loaf was sliced. Others experimented with peppers, spinach, or a creamy cheese ribbon. The dish was a practical way to incorporate extra protein or vegetables while keeping everyone curious and delighted at mealtime. Preparation required more care than a standard meatloaf, but not much extra effort. The meat mixture was shaped into a loaf, the filling inserted with precision, and the whole thing baked until golden and fragrant. The aroma alone could draw the family from other rooms, promising a comforting, satisfying meal. Beyond its practicality, meatloaf with surprise center carries emotional weight. It conjures images of mid-century kitchens, where care, creativity, and presentation mattered even in everyday dinners. Today, with sleek meal kits and TikTok recipe hacks, the charm might seem old-fashioned, but there's a lesson in its simplicity and delight. This meatloaf reminds us that food can be fun, nourishing, and a little theatrical all at once, proving that even frugal ingredients can create moments of wonder at the family table. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Creamed chipped beef on toast, affectionately known as SOS in military circles, carries a curious mix of practicality, nostalgia, and a slightly mischievous reputation. Its origins trace back to the early 20th century, when American households and Army mess halls alike needed a hearty, inexpensive way to stretch protein. Thinly sliced or chopped dried beef, preserved and salty, became the hero ingredient, transforming humble breakfasts or quick dinners into something surprisingly filling. By the time it crossed into civilian kitchens, it was no longer just survival food. It was comfort on a plate, a creamy, savory reminder of simpler times. The dish's ingredients were straightforward and unpretentious: dried beef, butter, flour, milk, and seasonings, all spooned generously over lightly toasted bread. The process was quick, efficient, and almost therapeutic in its routine. Melt butter in a skillet, whisk in flour to form a roux, gradually add milk until silky, then fold in the salty beef until every bite was enveloped in creamy richness. Spoon it over toast, and suddenly a few pantry staples had become a warm, satisfying meal. Some home cooks added a pinch of black pepper, a sprinkle of paprika, or a little grated cheese on top, demonstrating that even a simple dish could be personalized and elevated. Yet beyond its practicality, creamed chipped beef on toast carries a certain nostalgia. It evokes post-war kitchens, where mornings were rushed, budgets tight, and families gathered around the table for sustenance and conversation. The dish was as much about filling stomachs as it was about conveying care. A gesture that even the simplest ingredients could nourish both body and spirit. For many, it was also a rite of passage, a first, solo breakfast prepared by a teenager or a quick meal for college students navigating dorm life. Today, the dish might raise eyebrows beside avocado toast or artisanal lattes, but its charm endures for those who remember it. There's a tactile satisfaction in spreading the thick, creamy sauce over bread, a reminder that comfort doesn't need elaborate preparation or exotic ingredients. Creamed chipped beef on toast proves that ingenuity, thrift, and a little indulgence can combine to create a meal that's equal parts practical, nostalgic, and surprisingly delicious. A humble classic that quietly endures in American kitchens. Baked macaroni and cheese from a box. Baked macaroni and cheese from a box is the embodiment of mid-century American ingenuity, a dish that transformed humble pantry staples into golden, gooey comfort. Emerging in the 1930s and skyrocketing in popularity through the post-war 1950s, it offered families an affordable, reliable way to put a warm meal on the table without demanding time or culinary expertise. For households balancing budgets, busy schedules, and growing appetites, it was nothing short of a miracle. The ingredients were deceptively simple: elbow macaroni, a packet of powdered cheese, a bit of butter or margarine, and milk. Yet, in their simplicity lay the magic. The noodles boiled to a tender perfection, the cheese powder transformed with a splash of milk and a pat of butter into a creamy, tangy sauce, and the mixture, once combined, could be baked to create a golden crust that promised both indulgence and satisfaction. Some households added a sprinkle of breadcrumbs or extra shredded cheese on top, a small flourish that made this humble dish feel almost celebratory. Preparation was straightforward and forgiving. Boil, stir, mix, and bake, perfect for home cooks who juggled work, family, and the era's domestic expectations. It was fast, filling, and universally appealing, a dish that could satisfy a picky child and impress a hurried spouse without breaking the bank. Beyond its practicality, baked macaroni and cheese from a box carries deep nostalgic resonance. It evokes crowded kitchens, the aroma of melting cheese filling the house, and the quiet pride of creating a comforting meal with minimal effort. Today, it may seem quaint next to Instagram-worthy mac and cheese variations or artisanal pasta bakes, yet its charm endures. It reminds us that innovation in the kitchen doesn't always require exotic ingredients. Sometimes it's the simplest combinations that create the most enduring comfort, a creamy golden hug in a casserole dish. Hamburger casserole. Hamburger casserole is the kind of dish that whispers practicality while shouting comfort. A quintessential mid-century American dinner born out of necessity, creativity, and the desire to feed a family on a budget. In the 1950s and 60s, ground beef was affordable and versatile, making it a star ingredient for households looking to stretch their grocery dollars. Combined with noodles, potatoes, or rice, and smothered in a creamy or tomato-based sauce, this casserole became a reliable solution for weeknight meals that needed to be hearty, satisfying, and quick. The ingredients were simple and flexible: ground beef, onions, a starch like pasta or potatoes, a can of cream soup or tomato sauce, and a topping of cheese or breadcrumbs to achieve a golden finish. Often, cooks would sneak in frozen or leftover vegetables to boost nutrition and flavor, demonstrating a mix of thrift and ingenuity. There was something comforting about layering these elements in a casserole dish, knowing that the oven would transform a few humble ingredients into a warm, cohesive meal. Preparation was straightforward, yet strategic. Brown the beef with onions, mix in the starch and sauce, fold in vegetables if desired, and transfer everything into a casserole dish. The final touch, a sprinkling of cheese or crumbs, created a bubbly golden topping that invited anticipation. From oven to table, the dish exuded both aroma and warmth, signaling a meal that was as practical as it was satisfying. Hamburger casserole also carries emotional resonance, conjuring images of busy kitchens where families gathered for nourishment and conversation. It represented not just a dinner, but the ingenuity and care of home cooks who made every ingredient count. Today, it may seem modest alongside gourmet pastas or curated meal kits. Yet, it endures as a reminder that comfort and frugality often coexist on the same plate. Simple, adaptable, and hearty, hamburger casserole proves that timeless meals don't need to be complicated. They just need to satisfy both the stomach and the heart. Chicken a la king. Chicken a la king is a dish that somehow manages to feel both indulgent and approachable, a perfect reflection of mid-century American dining. Emerging in the 1950s, it became a symbol of elegance made accessible for suburban households eager to entertain or elevate a weeknight dinner. Its origins trace back to the turn of the century, but it was in the post-war era, with the rise of convenience foods and canned cream soups, that chicken a la king truly found its place in home kitchens. The ingredients were simple yet versatile. Tender chunks of chicken, often leftovers from a roast, paired with colorful vegetables like green peppers, mushrooms, or pimientos. All of this was enveloped in a creamy sauce, usually built from a base of cream of chicken soup or a quick roux with milk and butter. For a finishing touch, cooks often served it over toast, rice, or buttered noodles, turning a humble plate of leftovers into a dish that felt celebratory and refined. A sprinkle of parsley or a dash of paprika added just the right flourish. Some home cooks even added a splash of sherry for a slightly boozy depth, or folded in frozen peas for extra color, showing the dish's adaptability and appeal across households. Preparation was straightforward, practical, and forgiving. Chicken was shredded or diced, vegetables sautéed lightly, then everything folded into the luscious sauce. The mixture was warmed gently until thickened, ensuring every bite was creamy, flavorful, and comforting. Its forgiving nature made it a go-to for busy families, as it could be adapted to what was on hand while still looking polished on the table. Chicken a la king carries more than taste, it carries memory. It evokes mid-century dining tables, careful place settings, and the quiet pride of homemakers turning simple ingredients into an elegant meal. Today, it might seem almost quaint compared to modern fusion dishes or meal kit trends, but it endures as a reminder that comfort and sophistication can coexist. Chicken a la king proves that even modest ingredients, when treated with care, can transform into a dish that nourishes both body and soul, bridging nostalgia with timeless culinary charm. Scalloped potatoes with ham. Scalloped potatoes with ham is the kind of dish that feels like a warm hug on a plate, embodying both mid-century thrift and homey comfort. Rising to popularity in the 1940s and 50s, it became a staple in American kitchens where families sought hearty, satisfying meals that could stretch a small amount of meat into a filling dinner. The combination of tender potatoes, rich, creamy sauce, and salty bits of ham was both practical and indulgent, a dish that balanced economy with flavor. The ingredients were straightforward: thinly sliced potatoes, leftover or inexpensive ham, milk or cream, butter, flour, and seasonings. Some cooks added a touch of onion or a sprinkle of cheese to elevate the dish, but even in its simplest form, it had a richness that was comforting without being fussy. Ham, often a leftover from Sunday dinner or purchased in economical cuts, provided protein, while the potatoes offered substance, making this casserole both frugal and satisfying. Preparation was methodical yet simple. Potatoes were layered in a buttered baking dish, interspersed with diced ham, and occasionally a sprinkling of onions. A creamy sauce, thickened on the stovetop or poured directly from a can of cream soup, bound the layers together. The casserole was then baked until the top turned golden, and the potatoes were tender, filling the kitchen with an aroma that promised warmth and comfort. Beyond its practicality, scalloped potatoes with ham carries nostalgic resonance. It evokes family dinners, the hum of conversation, and the quiet pride of a cook who could turn simple ingredients into a beloved meal. Today, it may seem old-fashioned next to gourmet gratins or Instagram-ready side dishes, but it endures as a reminder that resourcefulness and care in the kitchen create meals that nourish both body and spirit. This casserole proves that humble ingredients, when combined thoughtfully, can become a timeless classic. Veal Parmesan Americanized. Veal Parmesan Americanized is a testament to mid-century America's love of adaptation, taking a refined Italian classic and transforming it into a home-cooked celebration that could grace the suburban table. While traditional Italian versions emphasized delicate veal cutlets and fresh ingredients, the Americanized rendition emerged in the 1950s and 60s, when convenience, affordability, and family appeal guided kitchen choices. This dish became a symbol of aspiration, elegant enough to impress dinner guests, yet practical enough for a busy household. The ingredients were straightforward and familiar: veal cutlets, breaded and fried until golden, topped with tomato sauce, often from a can, and finished with a generous layer of shredded mozzarella or American cheese. Some cooks added a sprinkling of Parmesan for authenticity, but the focus was always on creating a comforting, crowd-pleasing dish. Served with spaghetti or mashed potatoes, it transformed simple proteins and pantry staples into a meal that felt celebratory. Preparation was a careful balance of technique and convenience. Veal cutlets were pounded thin, dredged in breadcrumbs, and fried until crisp. The tomato sauce, sometimes enhanced with onions, garlic, or herbs, was poured over the cutlets, followed by a blanket of cheese that melted into a bubbly golden crown during baking. The result was a dish that looked impressive while delivering familiar flavors, a combination of crisp, tangy, and creamy that satisfied both adults and children. Beyond the practicalities, veal Parmesan Americanized carries emotional resonance. It conjures memories of family dinners where a touch of elegance met everyday life, of mid-century kitchens striving for sophistication without overcomplicating the process. Today, it might seem almost retro beside trendy Italian fusion or gourmet restaurant versions, yet it endures as a reminder that creativity, adaptation, and a bit of indulgence can transform a simple cut of meat into a dish that feels both special and comforting. Americanized veal Parmesan proves that aspiration and practicality can coexist on a single plate. Stuffed peppers with rice. Stuffed peppers with rice is a dish that embodies mid-century American ingenuity, a perfect balance of frugality, flavor, and presentation. Popularized in the 1950s and 60s, it offered home cooks a way to stretch inexpensive ingredients into a visually appealing and satisfying meal. With its roots in European traditions, particularly Italian and Eastern European cuisine, the Americanized version adapted easily to the suburban kitchen, combining pantry staples and leftovers into something both practical and impressive. The ingredients were simple yet versatile. Bell peppers, often hollowed and cleaned, served as edible vessels for a filling of cooked rice, ground beef or pork, onions, and seasonings. Some families added tomato sauce, canned vegetables, or a sprinkling of cheese, allowing each cook to personalize the dish according to taste and availability. The peppers themselves, with their bright colors and natural shape, created a sense of occasion, turning everyday ingredients into a centerpiece. Preparation required some care, but was straightforward. The filling was mixed, seasoned, and spooned carefully into the peppers before they were arranged in a baking dish, often with a bit of sauce poured around them to keep everything moist. Baking transformed the humble ingredients, melding flavors while softening the peppers to tender perfection. The result was a dish that felt nourishing, wholesome, and slightly elegant, despite its simplicity. Stuffed peppers with rice carries a strong sense of nostalgia. It evokes memories of family dinners where practicality met pride, of cooks taking modest ingredients and elevating them with care and creativity. Today, with fast meals, meal kits, and elaborate restaurant versions, it may seem quaint, but its charm endures. The dish reminds us that resourcefulness and thoughtful preparation can transform humble elements into something beautiful, hearty, and timeless. A perfect example of comfort, frugality, and culinary ingenuity wrapped in a colorful, edible package. Zucchini fritters/squash casserole. Zucchini fritters, or the baked squash casserole, is a quintessential example of mid-century American resourcefulness, born from the need to stretch abundant summer produce into satisfying meals. In the 1960s, many households found themselves with an overabundance of garden vegetables, and home cooks turned to clever recipes to transform humble squash into dishes that were both comforting and crowd-pleasing. What could have been an overwhelming glut of zucchini became golden fritters or a creamy casserole, proving that frugality and flavor could coexist beautifully. The ingredients were simple: grated zucchini or yellow squash, combined with eggs, breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs, a little flour, and seasonings. Some variations incorporated onions, cheese, or even a dollop of mayonnaise to enrich the texture. The fritters were pan-fried until crisp on the outside, tender inside, while the casserole version layered squash with creamy sauce and a crunchy topping before baking to bubbly perfection. Both options celebrated the season's bounty while remaining budget-friendly, a hallmark of mid-century home cooking. Preparation was practical, yet rewarding. Grating the squash and removing excess moisture ensured the final dish wasn't soggy, while folding in the binding ingredients required only a few simple steps. The fritters sizzled enticingly in a skillet, filling the kitchen with a comforting aroma, while the casserole's slow bake created a golden crust that invited eager hands to the table. Zucchini fritters and squash casserole carry nostalgic weight, evoking garden-to-table meals, family gatherings, and the ingenuity of cooks who transformed excess into delight. Today, they may seem quaint beside trendy vegetable dishes or Instagram-worthy baked goods, yet their charm endures. These recipes remind us that the simplest ingredients, treated with care, can nourish both body and spirit, offering a taste of ingenuity, thrift, and summertime comfort that remains timeless. Swedish meatballs and cream sauce. Swedish meatballs and cream sauce is a dish that perfectly captures the mid-century American fascination with European flavors adapted for the home kitchen. Gaining popularity in the 1950s and 60s, it allowed families to enjoy a touch of continental sophistication without venturing beyond the pantry staples of ground beef, breadcrumbs, and cream. The dish became a bridge between aspiration and practicality, a way for suburban households to serve something elegant yet approachable for weeknight dinners or modest entertaining. The ingredients were simple and accessible: ground beef or a mix of beef and pork, combined with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings to form tender, flavorful meatballs. A creamy sauce, often made from a roux enriched with milk or cream, enveloped the meatballs in a luscious coating, sometimes finished with a hint of nutmeg or a dash of Worcestershire sauce for depth. Traditionally served over buttered noodles or rice, the dish offered both substance and comfort, with the rich sauce soaking into every bite. Preparation required careful attention, but remained forgiving. Meatballs were shaped, browned in a skillet to develop a savory crust, and then simmered gently in the cream sauce until fully cooked. The process infused the sauce with flavor while keeping the meatballs tender, creating a cohesive, satisfying dish that felt both hearty and refined. For home cooks, it was an exercise in balance, crafting a dish that looked and tasted special while remaining entirely achievable with everyday ingredients. Swedish meatballs and cream sauce carries a nostalgic resonance that extends beyond taste. It evokes family dinners where effort met convenience and culinary aspiration was expressed in accessible ways. Today, alongside gourmet interpretations and restaurant versions, it may feel quaint, yet its charm endures. The dish reminds us that mid-century American kitchens were spaces of creativity, resourcefulness, and warmth, and that with simple ingredients and thoughtful preparation, even humble meatballs can become a meal worth savoring. Shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pie is a dish that perfectly embodies the marriage of practicality and comfort, a staple in mid-century American kitchens where resourcefulness was as valued as flavor. Though its roots lie in British and Irish culinary traditions, the American version emerged in the 1940s and 50s as a way to stretch inexpensive ingredients into a hearty, satisfying meal. For families navigating tight budgets or large appetites, shepherd's pie offered a complete dinner in a single casserole dish, combining protein, vegetables, and starch in a way that was both nourishing and economical. The ingredients were simple yet flexible: ground beef or lamb, sautéed with onions and sometimes carrots or peas, layered beneath a thick blanket of mashed potatoes. Cream, butter, or milk enriched the potatoes, while seasonings such as salt, pepper, and occasionally a touch of Worcestershire sauce elevated the flavors. Leftover meat could easily be incorporated, and frozen or canned vegetables made the dish accessible even when fresh produce was scarce. This adaptability made shepherd's pie a trusted solution for busy home cooks who wanted a warm, comforting meal without fuss. Preparation was straightforward but deliberate. The meat and vegetable filling was cooked until savory and flavorful, then spread evenly in a casserole dish. Mashed potatoes were layered on top, sometimes piped or smoothed for a neat finish, and the whole dish baked until golden and bubbling. The oven transformed modest ingredients into a meal that looked and tasted like care and effort had gone into it, a comforting centerpiece for family dinners. Shepherd's pie carries with it nostalgia for kitchens filled with the aroma of home-cooked goodness, where families gathered around the table, savoring both food and company. Today, it may seem old-fashioned compared to modern weeknight recipes or Instagram-ready bowls, yet its charm endures. It is a reminder that simplicity, ingenuity, and a touch of patience can create a dish that satisfies both body and heart, a timeless classic of frugality and comfort. Beef stroganoff over noodles. Beef stroganoff over noodles became a beloved fixture in American kitchens during the 1950s and 60s, when home cooks sought ways to bring the elegance of European cuisine to the family table without breaking the budget. Originally a Russian dish featuring tender strips of beef in a rich sour cream sauce, the American adaptation simplified ingredients and techniques while keeping the creamy, savory essence intact. Served over noodles, it transformed ordinary weeknight dinners into something that felt slightly indulgent, yet entirely achievable. The ingredients were accessible and practical: thinly sliced or cubed beef, onions, a touch of butter, flour, and a rich sauce made with sour cream or a blend of cream and canned mushroom soup. Mushrooms often joined the mix, adding earthiness and depth. Egg noodles provided the perfect canvas, absorbing the sauce while offering a soft, comforting texture. Seasonings were kept simple: salt, pepper, and perhaps a hint of paprika, allowing the natural flavors of the beef and creamy sauce to shine. Preparation was straightforward but rewarding. The beef was browned quickly to seal in flavor, onions and mushrooms sautéed until tender, and a simple roux or cream-based mixture transformed into a luscious sauce. Everything was gently combined, poured over a bed of cooked noodles, and often finished with a sprinkle of parsley for color. The process was forgiving yet satisfying, offering home cooks a chance to craft a meal that looked and tasted more elaborate than it truly was. Beef stroganoff over noodles carries nostalgic resonance, evoking mid-century kitchens filled with the rich aroma of sizzling meat and buttered noodles. Families gathered eagerly around the table, savoring both the flavor and the sense of occasion it brought to a simple dinner. Today, amid gourmet takes and meal kits, the dish may feel retro, but its charm endures. It reminds us that with modest ingredients and a bit of care, a comforting, elegant, and hearty meal can be created, one that nourishes both body and spirit. Tater tot hottish. Tater tot hottish is a dish that perfectly captures the spirit of mid-century American practicality, creativity, and regional comfort. Rising to prominence in the 1950s and 60s, particularly in the Midwest, it was designed to stretch modest ingredients into a filling, family-friendly meal. The dish became a symbol of ingenuity, a way to combine ground meat, vegetables, and starch into a single cohesive casserole that was both hearty and budget-conscious. Its charm lay not only in its taste, but in its ability to turn simple pantry staples into something visually appealing and satisfying. The ingredients were straightforward: ground beef or pork, a can of cream soup, often cream of mushroom or cream of chicken, frozen or canned vegetables, and of course, tater tots, those small cylinders of crisped potato that would crown the dish. Cheese was an optional but popular addition, adding richness and gooey texture to the finished casserole. The beauty of tater tot hottish was in its adaptability. Home cooks could mix and match vegetables, adjust seasoning, or layer ingredients creatively, making it a versatile solution for weeknight dinners or potlucks. Preparation was simple yet satisfying. The meat and vegetables were cooked together, combined with the creamy soup, then transferred to a casserole dish. Tater tots were arranged on top in neat rows, forming a golden, crispy lid once baked. The oven transformed humble ingredients into a bubbly, golden meal that was visually inviting and endlessly comforting. Tater tot hottish carries deep nostalgia for family gatherings, Midwestern kitchens, and the era's approach to practical, comforting meals. Today, it may seem kitschy or retro compared to gourmet casseroles or curated meal kits, yet it endures as a symbol of frugality, warmth, and community. With its combination of simplicity, heartiness, and playful presentation, Tater tot hottish reminds us that comfort food doesn't need to be elaborate. Sometimes it's the clever combination of the simplest ingredients that creates the most enduring meals. Sloppy Joe casserole. Sloppy Joe casserole is a dish that embodies the mid-century American talent for transforming humble, everyday ingredients into something hearty, comforting, and family-friendly. While the classic Sloppy Joe sandwich made its mark in the 1930s and 40s, the casserole adaptation emerged in the 1950s and 60s as home cooks sought ways to stretch ground beef, canned sauces, and pantry staples into a meal that could feed a crowd without much fuss. It was a dish born out of practicality, but it carried a certain charm. Messy, savory, and deeply satisfying. The ingredients were simple and adaptable. Ground beef browned and mixed with a tomato-based sauce, often enhanced with onions, bell peppers, or even a touch of Worcestershire sauce for depth. Layered over bread, biscuit dough, or a simple casserole base, the mixture was topped with shredded cheese or breadcrumbs to create a golden, bubbly crust. Some variations added a layer of cooked pasta or mashed potatoes to make the dish even more filling. Its simplicity and flexibility made it a go-to for busy families or community gatherings, turning what could have been a modest dinner into a full, satisfying meal. Preparation was straightforward but rewarding. The meat was browned, combined with sauce and vegetables, and then layered in a baking dish. The casserole was baked until the topping melted and browned, filling the kitchen with a savory aroma that invited hungry hands to the table. The result was messy, hearty, and utterly comforting, a dish that could easily become a family favorite with minimal effort. Sloppy Joe casserole carries nostalgia for mid-century kitchens, where efficiency met care and frugality met flavor. Today, it may feel retro beside gourmet sandwiches or Instagram-worthy pasta bakes, yet its appeal endures. It reminds us that comfort food is often about resourcefulness, warmth, and the joy of gathering around a table where even the simplest ingredients can create lasting memories. Chicken and rice bake. Chicken and rice bake is a quintessential example of mid-century American comfort food, a dish that perfectly balances practicality, flavor, and family appeal. Rising to popularity in the 1950s and 60s, it offered home cooks a way to create a complete, satisfying meal using modest ingredients and minimal effort. The combination of tender chicken, fluffy rice, and a creamy or savory sauce made it both hearty and economical, ideal for feeding a family without requiring hours in the kitchen. The ingredients were simple and accessible. Chicken pieces, often bone-in for flavor and economy, mixed with uncooked rice, a can of cream soup or homemade sauce, and sometimes vegetables like peas, carrots, or mushrooms. Seasonings were kept straightforward: salt, pepper, and a hint of herbs, allowing the natural flavors of the chicken and rice to shine. Cheese was occasionally sprinkled on top for richness, while a crunchy topping of breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs added texture and visual appeal. This versatility made the dish adaptable to what was on hand, a hallmark of mid-century home cooking. Preparation was uncomplicated but required careful layering. The chicken was seasoned and placed over the rice, which absorbed the sauce during baking, ensuring each bite was tender and flavorful. Vegetables could be nestled throughout, creating pockets of color and nutrition, while the oven worked its magic, turning simple components into a cohesive, comforting meal. The result was a golden, bubbling casserole that filled the kitchen with an inviting aroma and promised nourishment in every bite. Chicken and rice bake carries nostalgia for family dinners, the quiet satisfaction of creating something wholesome with minimal fuss, and the warmth of a home where practicality met care. Today, it might seem quaint compared to meal kits or restaurant-inspired casseroles, yet its charm endures. This dish reminds us that simplicity, thoughtfulness, and a touch of creativity can transform everyday ingredients into meals that nourish both body and spirit. Cheese and potato bake. Cheese and potato bake is the kind of dish that embodies mid-century American ingenuity, comfort, and simplicity all at once. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, it was a favorite for families seeking a hearty, satisfying side, or even a main, without breaking the budget. With humble, readily available ingredients, home cooks could turn ordinary potatoes and cheese into a golden, bubbling casserole that was both nourishing and visually appealing. It was a dish that celebrated frugality while delivering the kind of creamy, cheesy indulgence everyone craved. The ingredients were straightforward: thinly sliced or cubed potatoes, a generous amount of cheese, a bit of butter, milk or cream, and seasonings like salt, pepper, and sometimes a hint of paprika or mustard for depth. Some variations incorporated onions, breadcrumbs, or even a touch of flour to thicken the sauce, allowing the dish to adapt to whatever pantry staples were on hand. The simplicity of the components made it accessible for busy households, while the layering and baking transformed them into something comforting and almost celebratory. Preparation was practical but rewarding. Potatoes were layered in a buttered casserole dish, sprinkled with cheese between layers, and then bathed in milk or cream to create a rich, velvety texture as it baked. The top was often crowned with extra cheese or a sprinkle of breadcrumbs, forming a golden crust that bubbled enticingly in the oven. By the time it emerged, the aroma alone could draw the family together, promising warmth and satisfaction with every bite. Cheese and potato bake carries a nostalgic resonance, evoking kitchens filled with the smells of home and the quiet pride of turning simple ingredients into a beloved dish. Today, it may seem quaint next to gourmet gratins or Instagram-ready sides, yet its charm endures. This casserole reminds us that comfort, resourcefulness, and a little indulgence can coexist, creating meals that satisfy both body and soul. Pork chop casserole with cream soup. Pork chop casserole with cream soup is a quintessential mid-century American dish, born from a time when convenience and frugality guided home cooking without sacrificing comfort. Rising to popularity in the 1950s and 60s, it offered families a hearty, satisfying meal that could feed a crowd with minimal effort. Using inexpensive pork chops and pantry staples, this casserole combined protein, starch, and a creamy sauce into a single, cohesive dish that was both practical and inviting. The ingredients were simple and versatile. Pork chops, often bone-in or thin-cut for quicker cooking, a can of cream soup, usually mushroom or cream of chicken, milk to enrich the sauce, and seasonings like salt, pepper, and a hint of herbs. Some cooks added onions, sliced potatoes, or a layer of breadcrumbs for texture, while cheese occasionally made an appearance to enhance richness. The beauty of the dish lay in its adaptability. Leftovers could be incorporated, and the creamy sauce ensured even modest ingredients felt indulgent. Preparation was straightforward yet satisfying. Pork chops were lightly seasoned and arranged in a casserole dish, sometimes browned first for extra flavor. The creamy soup mixture was poured over the meat, enveloping it in a rich coating, and the casserole was baked until the chops were tender and the sauce bubbly. The oven transformed basic ingredients into a comforting meal that filled the kitchen with an irresistible aroma. Pork chop casserole with cream soup carries nostalgic weight, evoking images of mid-century kitchens where busy homemakers balanced efficiency and care, creating meals that nourished both body and spirit. Today, it may seem quaint next to gourmet pork dishes or trendy meal kits, but its charm endures. This casserole reminds us that with simple ingredients, thoughtful preparation, and a touch of creativity, a humble pork chop can become a dish that comforts, delights, and brings families together around the dinner table. Ham and pineapple ring bake. Ham and pineapple ring bake is a dish that perfectly captures the optimistic, slightly whimsical spirit of mid-century American entertaining. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, it embodied a time when home cooks sought to create visually striking, flavorful meals without requiring exotic ingredients or complicated techniques. The combination of sweet pineapple, savory ham, and creamy or cheesy layers turned a simple casserole into a centerpiece, ideal for Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, or potlucks, showcasing both practicality and showmanship. The ingredients were straightforward and approachable: sliced ham, canned pineapple rings or chunks, a creamy sauce made from a can of cream soup or a simple roux, and sometimes shredded cheese or breadcrumbs to add texture. Some variations incorporated a subtle layer of cooked rice or a few vegetables to make the dish more substantial. Sweet and salty, creamy and tangy, the flavors balanced beautifully, creating a dish that appealed to both children and adults alike. The pineapple rings, arranged neatly on top, added a sense of occasion, turning the casserole into something visually festive without demanding elaborate plating. Preparation was simple but deliberate. The ham and any additional ingredients were layered in a casserole dish, the creamy sauce poured over to bind everything together, and the pineapple arranged on top. A sprinkle of cheese or breadcrumbs added a golden finish as it baked, filling the kitchen with a warm, inviting aroma. By the time it came out of the oven, the dish looked both comforting and celebratory, ready to be served to family and friends. Ham and pineapple ring baked carries a nostalgic charm that goes beyond flavor. It evokes mid-century kitchens filled with conversation, laughter, and the pride of creating a meal that was both frugal and visually appealing. Today, it may seem quaint next to modern fusion dishes or Instagram-worthy plates, but its sweet, savory appeal endures, reminding us that ingenuity, simplicity, and a touch of flair can turn everyday ingredients into memorable family meals. Taco ring casserole. Taco ring casserole is a dish that perfectly encapsulates mid-century America's love for convenience, creativity, and family-friendly meals. Rising to popularity in the 1960s and 70s, it was part of a wave of casseroles that combined accessible ingredients with a fun, visually appealing presentation. The ring shape added an element of surprise and flair, turning a simple taco filling into a centerpiece suitable for casual dinners, potlucks, or holiday gatherings. It was practical, economical, and just a little playful, a hallmark of the era's home cooking. The ingredients were simple yet versatile. Ground beef, onions, and taco seasoning formed the flavorful core, often mixed with a can of diced tomatoes or tomato sauce for juiciness. Refrigerated biscuit dough or crescent rolls were used to create the ring, enveloping the savory filling and transforming it into a golden, pull-apart crust. Shredded cheese was generously sprinkled over the top or tucked inside for gooey richness, while optional additions like bell peppers or olives allowed for customization. The combination of seasoned meat, melted cheese, and soft, buttery bread created a dish that was comforting, filling, and universally appealing. Preparation was straightforward but satisfying. The meat was browned and mixed with seasonings, then carefully arranged in a circular pattern and covered with the dough. Cheese was added, and the ring was baked until golden and bubbling. The oven not only melded flavors, but also created a visually striking dish that encouraged interaction, as family members pulled apart individual wedges at the table. Taco ring casserole carries a nostalgic resonance, evoking kitchens filled with laughter, casual gatherings, and the pride of creating a meal that was both practical and fun. Today, it might seem kitschy compared to gourmet tacos or Instagram-ready dishes, yet its charm endures. It reminds us that comfort, creativity, and a little theatrical flair can transform everyday ingredients into a meal that delights both the stomach and the imagination. Cheeseball dinner with nuts and crackers. Cheese ball dinner with nuts and crackers is a dish that perfectly captures mid-century America's flair for entertaining with minimal effort and maximum charm. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, it became a fixture at cocktail parties, holiday gatherings, and potlucks, reflecting a time when presentation and convenience mattered as much as flavor. The cheese ball was both a conversation starter and a practical solution for home hosts, a visually appealing centerpiece that could feed a crowd while requiring little cooking skill. The ingredients were simple yet indulgent: cream cheese or a combination of cheeses, blended with seasonings such as garlic powder, onion powder, or Worcestershire sauce. Optional add-ins ranged from chopped pimentos to bits of green onion or finely diced peppers, creating layers of flavor. Once shaped into a ball, the cheese mixture was rolled in chopped nuts. Walnuts, pecans, or almonds were common to add texture and a touch of elegance. The finished cheese ball was then surrounded by crackers or breadsticks for serving, creating a self-contained appetizer that invited interaction and mingling. Preparation was straightforward yet satisfying. The cheese was softened and combined with seasonings and optional mix-ins, then carefully shaped into a smooth, cohesive ball. Rolling it in nuts added both visual appeal and a contrasting crunch. Once chilled, the cheese ball was ready to greet guests, offering a creamy, savory bite paired perfectly with the crisp crackers. The simplicity of assembly made it ideal for busy hosts, while the finished product appeared thoughtful and festive. Cheese ball dinner with nuts and crackers carries a nostalgic charm that goes beyond taste. It evokes images of mid-century living rooms filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the quiet pride of a host who could entertain effortlessly. Today, it may feel retro beside artisanal charcuterie boards, but its appeal endures. The dish reminds us that elegance and enjoyment can be achieved with modest ingredients, a little creativity, and a touch of showmanship, making it a timeless symbol of conviviality and culinary ingenuity. Fondue night, cheese or broth. Fondue night, whether with cheese or savory broth, was a symbol of mid-century American social dining, a trend that took hold in the 1960s and 70s as home cooks sought both novelty and convenience. Imported from European traditions, fondue became an accessible, interactive centerpiece for entertaining, turning the simple act of eating into a shared experience. It was the perfect combination of spectacle, flavor, and practicality, a communal meal that encouraged conversation, creativity, and a bit of culinary theater. For a cheese fondue, the ingredients were simple yet indulgent: shredded Swiss or cheddar cheese, mixed with a splash of wine or beer, a touch of cornstarch to stabilize, and seasonings such as mustard or garlic. Cubed bread, vegetables, and even small cooked meats provided dippers, allowing guests to personalize each bite. Broth-based fondue, meanwhile, offered a lighter, versatile option: a seasoned beef, chicken, or vegetable broth into which bite-sized pieces of meat or vegetables were cooked tableside. Both variations celebrated communal cooking, making every diner an active participant in the meal. Preparation was straightforward, but involved a few key steps to ensure success. Cheese was melted slowly with liquid and seasoning for a smooth, creamy texture, while broth was seasoned and kept at a gentle simmer. Fondue pots or chafing dishes maintained ideal temperatures, inviting everyone to dip, swirl, and savor. The interactive nature of the meal turned eating into an event, making even simple ingredients feel special. Fondue night carries a strong sense of nostalgia, conjuring images of living rooms and dining tables transformed into convivial spaces where laughter mingled with the scent of melted cheese or savory broth. Today, it may feel retro compared to trendy hot pots or curated dining experiences, yet its charm endures. Fondue reminds us that meals can be about more than sustenance. They can be shared experiences, a celebration of connection, creativity, and the simple joy of gathering around a communal pot. Pimento cheese stuffed celery boats. Pimento cheese stuffed celery boats are a delightful emblem of mid-century American entertaining, reflecting a time when simple ingredients could be transformed into visually appealing, flavorful appetizers. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, these snacks combined practicality, thrift, and a touch of flair, making them a staple at cocktail parties, potlucks, and family gatherings. The dish captured the era's fascination with bite-sized foods that were easy to prepare, transport, and serve, while still looking festive on a tray. The ingredients were modest yet flavorful. Celery stalks, crisp and fresh, formed the base, while pimento cheese, a creamy, tangy mixture of cheddar cheese, mayonnaise, and diced pimentos, provided richness and a pop of color. Some variations added a hint of onion, garlic powder, or a dash of hot sauce to give the filling an extra layer of flavor, while the naturally hollow celery served as the perfect vessel, making each bite both convenient and satisfying. The combination of crunchy celery and creamy, savory cheese was a textural delight, appealing to adults and children alike. Preparation was quick and satisfying. Celery stalks were washed and trimmed, the pimento cheese mixed until smooth, then spooned generously into each groove. The finished boats were often chilled briefly before serving, allowing the cheese to firm slightly and making the presentation crisp and inviting. Arranged on a platter, they were colorful, neat, and easy to pick up, embodying mid-century efficiency and charm. Pimento cheese-stuffed celery boats carry nostalgia for a time when home entertaining emphasized care, creativity, and the ability to make simple ingredients shine. Today, they may feel quaint next to contemporary hors d'oeuvres or artisanal finger foods, yet their appeal endures. They remind us that thoughtful presentation, balance of flavors, and a touch of ingenuity can transform humble ingredients into a snack that is timeless, approachable, and undeniably comforting. Chicken Kiev. Chicken Kiev is a dish that evokes mid-century glamour in the American home kitchen, a symbol of elegance made approachable with pantry staples and a bit of technique. Popularized in the 1950s and 60s, it brought European sophistication to suburban tables, allowing home cooks to serve something that felt luxurious without requiring a professional chef's skills. The dish's dramatic presentation, golden, breaded chicken with a hidden butter and herb center, made it a showpiece for dinner parties or special family meals, a dish that suggested care, skill, and a touch of indulgence. The ingredients were simple but carefully balanced. Chicken breasts, flattened and rolled around a compound butter flavored with garlic, parsley, and sometimes a hint of lemon. The rolls were then dredged in flour, dipped in beaten eggs, and coated with breadcrumbs before being fried or baked to a crisp golden exterior. The magic of Chicken Kiev lay in that hidden buttery center, which melted during cooking, infusing the chicken with flavor and creating a silky, indulgent sauce that burst forth when sliced. Side dishes were often modest, steamed vegetables, mashed potatoes, or rice, to allow the chicken to shine as the centerpiece. Some cooks added a light sprinkle of paprika over the top for visual flair, or served it with a wedge of lemon to brighten the richness, highlighting the dish's balance of elegance and simplicity. Preparation was methodical but rewarding. Flattening the chicken, carefully rolling it with the chilled butter, and sealing the edges required attention to detail, but the process was forgiving enough for home cooks willing to follow the steps. Frying or baking transformed the simple components into a dish that looked and tasted elaborate, filling the kitchen with a rich, savory aroma. Chicken Kiev carries strong, nostalgic resonance, recalling mid-century kitchens where effort, presentation, and care mattered as much as taste. Today, it may seem retro or even intimidating compared to modern quick-cooked chicken recipes, but its allure endures. The dish reminds us that with patience, attention to detail, and a few simple ingredients, a humble chicken breast can become a meal that delights both the eye and the palate, offering a taste of culinary sophistication at home and a glimpse into the elegance and ingenuity of mid-century American cooking. Meat and cheese spiral bake. Meat and cheese spiral bake is a dish that perfectly embodies mid-century American ingenuity, turning simple, budget-friendly ingredients into a visually impressive and satisfying meal. Rising to popularity in the 1950s and 60s, it was ideal for family dinners, potlucks, or casual entertaining. The spiral shape added flair, while the combination of seasoned ground meat and melted cheese created a hearty, comforting experience that appealed to both children and adults alike. The ingredients were modest but flavorful: ground beef or sausage, a variety of cheeses, bread dough or crescent rolls, and seasonings such as onion, garlic, salt, and pepper. Some variations incorporated tomato sauce, spinach, or diced vegetables, allowing cooks to stretch the dish further and add nutritional variety. The spiral structure not only made the bake visually striking, but also allowed layers of meat and cheese to meld together during baking, creating a cohesive, savory dish that was both filling and satisfying. Adding a sprinkle of Parmesan on top or a dusting of paprika could elevate the flavors and give the presentation an extra touch of flair, making it feel just a little fancier for family guests or special occasions. Preparation was straightforward but required a bit of assembly. The dough was rolled out and layered with cooked, seasoned meat and generous amounts of cheese before being rolled into a spiral or pinwheel shape. The spiral was then placed in a greased baking dish, brushed with butter or egg wash for a golden finish, and baked until the crust was crisp and the cheese was bubbly. The aroma that filled the kitchen during baking, rich, savory, and slightly sweet from the dough, was a promise of the comforting flavors to come. Meat and cheese. Spiral bake carries nostalgia for mid-century kitchens, evoking images of families gathered around the table, eagerly slicing into a dish that was both playful and practical. Today, it may seem retro beside modern gourmet casseroles or Instagram-ready meals, yet its charm endures. It reminds us that thoughtful layering of simple ingredients can transform everyday components into a memorable, shareable dish that nourishes both body and spirit, celebrating creativity, comfort, and practicality all at once. Its enduring appeal lies in its adaptability, warmth, and the simple joy of sharing a homemade creation straight from the oven. Beef and mushroom pie. Beef and mushroom pie is a dish that embodies mid-century American comfort food, combining hearty ingredients with the practicality and warmth that defined family dinners of the 1950s and 60s. Rooted in European culinary traditions, the pie was adapted for the home kitchen, using accessible ingredients and straightforward techniques to create a meal that was both filling and elegant. Its flaky crust and savory filling made it a favorite for Sunday dinners, potlucks, or casual weeknight meals, offering the perfect balance of indulgence and practicality. The ingredients were simple but flavorful: tender chunks of beef, sautéed with onions and garlic, combined with earthy mushrooms and a touch of herbs for depth. A thickened gravy or sauce, often made from a roux and beef stock, bound the filling together and enriched the flavors. The topping was a buttery pastry crust, homemade or store-bought, designed to bake into a golden, flaky layer that encased the savory filling. Some cooks added vegetables like carrots or peas to extend the dish and add color, turning a simple pie into a complete, satisfying meal. Preparation was methodical, but approachable. The beef and mushrooms were browned and simmered until tender, then combined with the sauce and poured into a pie dish. The pastry was carefully laid over the top, edges crimped and slits added for ventilation, ensuring a crisp, golden finish. Baking transformed modest ingredients into a dish that looked and tasted like care and effort had gone into it, filling the kitchen with rich, comforting aromas. Beef and mushroom pie carries strong nostalgic resonance, recalling kitchens filled with warmth, conversation, and the quiet pride of turning simple ingredients into a beloved family meal. Today, it may seem retro compared to modern gourmet pie or curated meal kits, yet its charm endures. The dish reminds us that with thoughtful preparation, even humble ingredients can create a meal that satisfies both body and soul. Sweet and sour meatballs over rice. Sweet and sour meatballs over rice is a dish that perfectly captures mid-century American ingenuity, balancing bold flavors, practicality, and family-friendly appeal. Rising to popularity in the 1950s and 60s, it became a staple in suburban kitchens where home cooks sought meals that were both satisfying and visually appealing. The dish offered the perfect combination of tender meatballs, tangy sweet sauce, and fluffy rice, a complete, comforting dinner that would be made with accessible ingredients and minimal fuss. The ingredients were straightforward: ground beef or a mixture of beef and pork for the meatballs, breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings such as onion powder, salt, and pepper. The sauce was where the dish truly shined, typically made from a base of ketchup, vinegar, sugar, and sometimes pineapple juice or soy sauce, giving it a lively sweet and sour balance. Bell peppers, pineapple chunks, or onions were often added to enhance texture and flavor, while white or brown rice served as a neutral canvas to absorb the vibrant sauce. This combination created a dish that was visually colorful, flavorful, and filling, appealing to both adults and children. Preparation was simple but rewarding. The meatballs were shaped and browned, either in a skillet or baked, then simmered gently in the sweet and sour sauce until fully cooked and infused with flavor. The rice was cooked separately and served as a bed for the saucy meatballs, creating a harmonious plate where the tangy sauce clung to each grain. Sweet and sour meatballs over rice carries nostalgic resonance, evoking images of mid-century kitchens where practicality met flavor and family gathered eagerly around the table. Today, it may feel retro compared to gourmet fusion dishes or meal kits, yet its charm endures. The dish reminds us that with simple ingredients, a little creativity and care, humble meatballs can become a vibrant, comforting, and memorable meal that nourishes both body and soul. Cabbage and noodle bake. Cabbage and noodle bake is a dish that epitomizes mid-century American resourcefulness and comfort, a true testament to the era's ability to transform humble, inexpensive ingredients into a hearty family meal. Popular in the 1940s through the 1960s, it became a favorite among home cooks seeking dishes that were filling, affordable, and simple to prepare. With its combination of tender cabbage, soft noodles, and a creamy or cheesy sauce, it offered both warmth and sustenance, making it a reliable weeknight dinner or potluck contribution. The ingredients were straightforward and budget-friendly: wide egg noodles or spaghetti, shredded cabbage, a can of cream soup, or a homemade butter and flour sauce, and seasonings such as salt, pepper, and a touch of onion. Some variations added cheese for richness or breadcrumbs on top for a slight crunch. The dish made the most of pantry staples and fresh produce, stretching inexpensive vegetables and pasta into a satisfying meal that could feed a family without much fuss. Preparation was simple yet purposeful. The noodles were cooked until tender, the cabbage sautéed or lightly boiled, and the creamy sauce combined to coat the mixture evenly. Everything was layered in a casserole dish, sometimes topped with cheese or breadcrumbs, then baked until bubbly and golden. The result was a comforting, flavorful dish with a texture that was soft, creamy, and slightly crisp on top. The kind of meal that felt like a warm embrace at the dinner table. Cabbage and noodle bake carries a strong sense of nostalgia, evoking kitchens filled with the aroma of bubbling casseroles and families gathered around a shared meal. Today, it may seem modest compared to gourmet pastas or Instagram-ready dishes, yet its charm endures. The casserole reminds us that resourcefulness, simple ingredients, and thoughtful preparation can create a meal that nourishes both body and spirit, a timeless classic of mid-century American home cooking. Seafood casserole with Ritz cracker topping. Seafood casserole with Ritz cracker topping is a dish that captures mid-century America's flair for comfort, creativity, and a touch of elegance. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, it was a way for home cooks to bring a taste of the sea to the suburban table using accessible ingredients without the fuss of fine dining. This casserole became a favorite for family dinners, holiday gatherings, and potlucks, offering a luxurious combination of creamy seafood filling and a buttery, crisp topping that delighted both the eye and the palate. The ingredients were straightforward yet indulgent, a mix of seafood, often shrimp, crab, or canned fish, blended with a creamy base made from cream soup or a simple roux enriched with milk or cream. Seasonings like onion, garlic, salt, and pepper added depth, while optional vegetables such as peas, mushrooms, or celery provided texture and color. The signature Ritz cracker topping, crushed and mixed with butter, created a golden, crunchy layer that contrasted beautifully with the tender, creamy filling beneath. Cheese was occasionally added for extra richness, enhancing the savory, comforting quality of the casserole. Preparation was simple but satisfying. The seafood was gently folded into the creamy mixture, poured into a greased casserole dish, and topped with the buttery cracker crumbs. Baking transformed the dish, melting flavors together while creating a crisp, inviting crust. The aroma of buttery crackers and simmering seafood filled the kitchen, signaling a meal that was both special and approachable. Seafood casserole with Ritz cracker topping carries a nostalgic resonance, evoking mid-century kitchens where home cooks balanced practicality with presentation. Today, it may feel retro compared to gourmet seafood dishes or modern seafood bakes, yet its charm endures. The casserole reminds us that simple ingredients, thoughtful preparation, and a touch of creativity can transform humble elements into a comforting, memorable, and indulgent meal that brings families together. And there you have it, 30 classic Betty Crocker dinners that have quietly faded from our tables, each one a little reminder of mid-century comfort, creativity, and family ingenuity. If any of these nostalgic dishes sparked a memory or made your stomach rumble, go ahead and give this video a like, share it with friends who love retro recipes, and subscribe for more trips down culinary memory lane. Who knows, you might just be inspired to bring one of these forgotten favorites back to your own dinner table.